Okay, what's up guys? This is a really speedy introduction and tutorial to the presets that you have just purchased. So thank you so much for purchasing these presets, it really means a lot. If you don't know who I am, but you have purchased these presets maybe through an ad, my name is Luke Jackson Clark. I'm a photographer, travel photographer on Instagram known as @WatchLuke, and I travel the world taking photos, and I've finally released some presets to the world that I use on a daily basis, and this video is basically to take you through the presets and kind of give you a bit of a tutorial of those presets. So I'm going to take you in to my computer screen right now, and I'm going to take you through the process of how I use them, how to utilize them to the tip-top way, and then also to just give you a quick idea of how to import them. Super simple. I'm not going to do the full import process. I'm literally just going to show you how to do it like in Lightroom. And then also in the folder there should be some DNGs that you can import into your phone if you just use Lightroom Mobile, for example. So thanks again, and let's jump in to the computer screen, I guess. Boom. Okay, so we are here in the computer screen. Just going to make sure that I'm framed up nicely here. There we go, perfect. So I've got a selection of photos here that I thought worked well to show you guys how to use them, and also run through a little, a few problems that you might run into while using these presets and how to overcome those problems to make sure that you don't just think they're a pile of rubbish, because I like to think they're not. But let me take you through them, show you some good examples, some examples of photos that might seem like they don't work with them at all, and then show you how to make changes so that they do. So this is a photo that I took in Italy on a random roadside. It was really cool. We got really lucky with some motorbikes coming past. So just to quickly show you, here are the presets on the side here. In a little file. They are called WatchLuke Adventure Collection, which I'm sure you guys know, but this is how you download the presets and import them into your Lightroom. So you go into the Develop tab on the side. All this can be found in the user guide, by the way, in a bit more detail, and it goes further. But just to quickly show you exactly where it is that I'm talking about, this is the Develop tab. You go to this, and then you'd see your photos, and then up here on the presets tab, if it's closed, you just open it up. You don't even need to open it up on the import. Just go plus and then import presets and click that, and then it goes through to your files. This is on a random file from New Zealand, and then you go to your downloads just here. You'd find the file that you literally just downloaded from me on my website, and it's as simple as that. You just download the XMP files or the Intertemplate ones if you're on the older version of Lightroom, and it's as simple as that. And then it comes up in your presets just like this in the WatchLuke folder, and you just open them, and then you have 46 presets to play with, which is super exciting. I'm super pumped with them. I use them all the time, so I'm excited to hear what you guys think. And if, while using these presets over a period of time, you really like the experience and you're watching this video and you've enjoyed this as well, please feel free to leave a bit of love, maybe a review on the website, or share your work and what you've done with them on Instagram, and then maybe DM them to me or just tag me in them, and I'll try and look out for them and post them on my stories and share that and all that stuff, because I want to make sure that a lot of people get to see these presets, because I'm pretty happy with them. And I hope you are too. So, here are the presets. There's 46 of them. They all do different things. The intention is there's landscape presets, there are OG presets, which is quite a simple base from what I created all the other presets off. They were the original presets that I worked with back in the beginning of 2020, that I created with kind of a mindset of working on greens. Because I have in the past struggled with greens, but now with these presets I don't ever. I'm really excited about that. And the OG presets are like the base that I started with, so if you ever want to kind of restart and create your own presets from these bases, they're a good base to start with. They're very decontrasted, don't have that much punch to them, but that was kind of the intention. I wanted to start with these really basic looking presets that I could create some interest and excitement with. So that's the OG ones. Then we have artistic, which are really fun looking presets. They have like a cool finish to them that, for example, I might not post to my Instagram feed, but I would, use on maybe some product work or commercial work or some story stuff or just some documentary photography that I'd take from around the world. Then you have the portrait presets, which are actually some of my favorites, even though I don't shoot portraits. They seem to work really well with skin tones and all that stuff, which I'm really excited about. Most of the presets do as well. Some of them have like extremely punchy oranges though, so they might kind of seem a bit in your face, quite literally, with skin tones sometimes. But all you need to do is desaturate the oranges sometimes. And then we've got some bonus presets, which I added in there near the end, and they were some of my personal favorite presets that I play around with just for fun, and I thought you might enjoy them as well. And they are, what's quite exciting about the presets as a whole is you can really break down the tone curves and what I use to try and create, potentially better ones for yourself or ones that fit your desired style in the future. And for example, the Spice or Ice preset is a personal favorite of mine because it really like goes deep into the tone curves, and you can kind of really see like, oh, okay, so that does that to the photo, so you can kind of take that away for yourself. So this is a photo that I took in Italy on a trip on a random side of the road. I'm just going to show you most of the presets work on this photo. A lot of the presets work on everything, really, and you can just get an idea of how they work. So Green Maybe is one of my favorites. Don't ask what the name is. I don't know why I chose that one. I did. And it's just a very clean, simple preset that I use on almost all of my Instagram social media posts with anything that has green involved. Now, the cool thing about this one is in the tone curves, it plays with the right colors to complement greens, and then in the HSL curve, so I'm going to press this one, you can take a look at what the tone curves do to the photo. In the HSL curve, the greens are quite low, and I do that just so that you can see like a nice quick almost end image straight off the bat with greens, because some people don't like greens, but I really like them with these presets. Now what you can do with this is you can just up the green saturation with this one, and up to literally any saturation the greens still look good most of the time on most photos. So the really cool thing about that is the greens are almost perfect with Green Maybe and quite a few of the other ones to any saturation. You just can decide how saturated you want them, basically. And this, for me, completely transformed the whole process for me, because I didn't really ever use greens in my content or on social media. You can see if you scroll down on @WatchLuke on Instagram, and now I use them all the time. So that's just a quick example of how the presets work. Let's just run through all of the landscape presets and show you how they look on this specific photo. So let's reset it. Also, before you're jumping into the presets, make sure to check the exposure, the temperature, and the tint, because none of the presets affect them. I haven't touched any of them because they're very specific to your shooting conditions. And this one, for example, is quite well exposed, has the right temperature already, and has a solid tint. So I wouldn't really change too much about it. But if, for example, I wanted to up the exposure a little bit just to get a bit more interest and you can see a bit more in there, then you get the idea. Just bring the balance up a little bit more. Just a really important thing to note, and that's what I'm going to show you a little bit later. But here is an example of all the other presets on this photo. They all really work. They all have just different vibes. Some are really moody, some are quite saturated, some are brown, some are green, some are like really grungy, like this green grunge, for example, which was actually just a random test one that I just put in at the end because I was like, you know what, people might like this. Then we got the tropical mood ones, the tropical blue and tropical contrast, which are quite contrasty presets that work quite well on like an overall mix of photos. We got Snow Day, which is I made specifically to actually a photo of a husky in the snow, and it just seems to work with snow photos and kind of punches out the colours in the trees, and also works with the nice blues of the snow. We got Street Fade, which is kind of mainly for street stuff. And you get the idea. All these landscape ones usually work on most of the photos. Night light is a specific night city light preset, so I wouldn't use that on anything other really. But a good example of the temperature thing is night light still works on most photos. If you up the temperature, boom, it doesn't look like it, but when you up the temperature it does. So now let's continue onwards. This one, for example, is just a random product shot, and you know, most of them work on them, but let's jump into the artistic ones and show you how they work. So that's a black and white preset, which is quite rare. I don't post any of that, but I love black and white myself. If you like black and white, then faded black and white is for you. We've got cinema mood here, which is just quite a good show of how this works on maybe some product or commercial work that you're working on. It has quite a cinematic, well-balanced tonal and lighting range, and I really love that preset. It's one of my favorite presets of all of them, and I use that on a lot of my commercial work and a lot of my story work on social media. So that's an example of some of the artistic ones. Let's just run through some of those. And then into the portrait ones, again, they work skin tones. If you're working with skin tones, the portrait presets most of the time work really well. Okay, let's jump into this photo here, and I put this in specifically for the nightlight preset because I actually made the nightlight preset on this. So, boom. There we go, that's how it looks. It basically makes everything quite cold and punchy and almost electric. And then if you up the temperature, if it, for example, is too blue for you, if you up the temperature, it still does really beautiful things with city images. It's one of my favorite city presets. I have a few in the pack, and this is one of them. So make sure to keep your eyes on temperature and also exposure, just to kind of make sure that your shot is correctly exposed, because sometimes in cities you have underexposed images, so make sure that it's nicely exposed. Obviously that's overexposed. Okay, let's jump in to this shot. Now this one is a good example of temperature, because this is one of the one that I'm going to show you here, which is city. Which is city mood. In the original format, it looks kind of warm. Now in this photo, it looks good warm, I like to think, but in this photo I want it to be a bit cool and kind of moody. So if you just bring down the temperature a little bit, boom, you've got something that has an overall solid color balance. This is actually the preset that I used on the post on my Instagram, so if you want to go find that, you can pretty much see exactly how similar this is to the post. It's got quite a cold, moody vibe. So if you just bring the temperature down, every single time you put a preset on, if it looks like I don't know, if you wanted it to be a bit cooler, or you want it to be warmer, or you wanted it to work better, play with the temperature and usually it works instantly. So that photo is with city mood, and it's just quite nice for any kind of like city shots that you have out on the go, that are kind of streety. Now this is the first preset, this is the first portrait photo that I added in here. It's one of my favourite shots of my friend called Amy, and she looks incredible here, and it's just quite a good example. It's a good one to show you through some of the portrait presets. Also, this photo goes quite well with the normal landscape ones as well. So faded whites, for example, which is a landscape preset, also works pretty well on some portraits dependent on what you're shooting. So all of the presets kind of work on those things, so you just play around. So let's go to the portrait presets here. Breeze here is one of my favorites. I made this back in the start of 2021 when I was doing a project with Columbia and shooters, and it just created quite a cinematic effect. It's quite a well-balanced preset. Doesn't have too much contrast, which is quite fun, so you can add a little bit more later on. So this is quite a good example of temperature. So, you know, if for example it looks a bit cold on the skin tones, for example, if you bring up the temperature a little bit, boom, works really well. Now set the skin tones back to normal, reset the photo, and then you just throw earth tone here, which is quite a earthy and warm portrait preset. We've got the people, which is actually a preset based off the cinema mood, which is in the artistic section. It's kind of mainly for people. If, for example, in this one, let's have a look, and you like a bit punchier oranges in skin tones, click on it, but you really like the kind of purples and the shadows and all that stuff, click on it, jump into oranges and up the saturation, or up the yellow saturation, and boom, now you have a lot more punch to the colors, and compared to the preset, which looks a little bit less saturated, it's quite a simple change that makes all the difference. It's very easy changes to make. So let's reset here again, then we have pop, we have the one and the portrait, and then we have the bonuses, which I'm going to get to because they're actually some of my favourite presets. So I'm going to skip that, but here's green. So for example, like some of the classic kind of green, maybe faded whites, for example, will work really well. Fresh frame. So this is actually a really good example. So the photo in itself is a little bit cold. So what I'm going to do is up the temperature a little bit just before I edit the photo and make it the correct temperature, and then the presets start to work a little bit better. So let's have a look at faded whites. When it's on there, it looks a bit cold. Now if we up the temperature a little bit and then bring up the exposure, boom, it looks a little bit better, and the overall image is a bit nicer to digest. Now let's jump on to these portraits. Now these are some of my favourite pictures I've ever taken. Not that I post portraits, but I'm very happy with them. They have a good kind of balance as they are already, so the second you put the presets on, it's really exciting. So let's jump into some of the portrait presets. So we've got pop here. I made some of these presets on this photo, so I like to think they work. But yeah, so if you have a portrait, just run through the portrait presets and maybe some of the landscape ones to see if they work. Now this is where I'm going to show you the bonus presets as well. These ones I wanted to kind of bring a kind of filmic look into the mix. I don't actually shoot film personally. I really want to start, but I really love the kind of aesthetic that comes from it. So I worked a lot in the tone curves here. So when you're going through them, make sure you look at the tone curves and see how I've used them to create certain colours in shadows and highlights. So this one is deep film, and it has quite an earthy feeling to it. It has some greens in the shadows, and then brings out some kind of warm skin tones with some nice grain added in. And then we've got Spice, which is probably my personal favourite preset, which was an addition at the end, and it has this really kind of cold but spicy element to it. Now that sounds kind of weird, but in the skin tones it has this kind of red spicy vibe to it, and then in everything else, in the highlights and maybe all the whites, it has this cooler tone, which is quite a nice complement. So I really enjoy this preset, and this fadeaway preset is a very simple, uncontrasty, very basic grainy preset. So if you like that uncontrasty vibe, fadeaway might be your one. This is just another example of how the portrait presets work. Super cool looking dude. This is Timothy, what a legend. It's another example of Spice right there. Now, I added this photo in specifically of my buddy Julian, Care for Art legend. Big shout out to him if you're watching. What's up, man? Because it's quite a cold image. Now, it's really important to show you this because if, for example, you're running through some of your portraits and none of the presets work on your portraits or on any other photo, and like the skin tones are really cold, or like they look really mushy. Let me just make sure I'm a little bit brighter. And they look really mushy, it's probably because your temperature is just a bit cold. So this is a good example of it because the temperature is really cold and it doesn't really work. So let's jump in with pop preset, skin tones look horrible. So instantly, if I'm working with his presets, I'm like, oh, what has Luke sold me? What is going on? But all you have to do is throw up the temperature, and then boom. Firstly, the skin tones look solid, but overall, the image almost looks finished. So all you'd need to do is, finish off the crops. I don't know, that's just a quick crop. Probably terrible, but you get what I mean. Simple there, play with a bit of the exposure, maybe up the contrast a little bit, and boom. You got a pretty sexy before and after there, and all it was because the temperature just wasn't at the right number. So make sure you play with temperature before you do this. It's really, really important. Otherwise, you might think these presets are a pile of rubbish. So that's just resetting it to how the original temperature was. It just doesn't work. So up the temperature does the job. Okay, this is an example of a photo that is a little bit faded right off the bat. So the presets by itself might look like they don't work. They just look a bit kind of faded as a whole. So usually on most images, if you run through all of the presets, there's one in there that works, or like a selection of them. Tropical contrast is usually pretty solid and pretty, you can count on it if it's like a bit of a hazy image. But I also added in like punch and vivid for slightly more kind of hazy images. But if, for example, you don't want to use them, give me 2 secs. The computer is loading. Okay, cool. And you want to use green maybe because you really love that preset. Well, off the bat, it looks a bit weird. Just doesn't really work on the image. So what you do is you play around with contrast, you play around with the dehaze tool, then you go, oh, the greens look a bit desaturated, which in some images work really well because sometimes greens are just massively saturated, but in this one, originally they aren't. So you want to up the greens right there, maybe up the yellows, and then maybe even up the temperature dependent on what kind of look you're going for, and then boom, it works. Just a couple of changes to the sliders and you're good to go. Now, this is another good example of, in the original image, the skin tones of the guy in the image, this is Daniel, legend, are quite nice. But the second you throw on the preset, it kind of ruins those. So what you would do is you just play around with the adjustment brushes, and you'd add, obviously this is a really basic example and it's not a very good one, but you get the idea. You'd spend a bit more time making sure it looks clean. You play with the temperature, play with the tint, and then boom, it kind of looks like the guy has really good skin tones. So all you need to do is play around with the selective adjustments, the brushes, and the graduated filters, and you're good to go. Okay, this one's just a street image. I added this one in just to show you how the street preset works, which should be street fade. There we go. In some of the images, because a lot of street photos are quite dark as they are, street fade comes up quite dark. So what you do is you just jump in, play with the exposure, and boom, that's the image done. It has some really kind of, it brings out the punchiness in the oranges and the yellows, and kind of brings down the highlights a little bit, so it kind of makes it all a little bit more balanced. Now, this one is an example of a very green image, and I just want to show you how the green presets work on it. So we've got green maybe. Pretty much all of the presets work on this image. So if you've got anything that is a green heavy image, you're good to go with these presets. And if, for example, you don't like greens, then things like deep brown works really well, kind of changing those greens to like a more browny color. Okay, here's just an example of a really cool dude in Bahrain. Works with some of the bonus presets and the portrait presets. Just wanted to add that in to show you. Now, this is a photo of my girlfriend. If you're watching this, then hello. But this photo was taken by her at sunset. And the image itself is a little bit hazy and a bit faded. So a lot of the presets don't look like they work on it because it's such a hazy image. Now I'm just going to run you through them. And it makes it look like just really hazy as it is. Well, that one, the high contrast one, specifically called high contrast for a reason, does seem like it works. But let's look at the portrait ones. They look a little bit like they're not contrasty enough. Now, that's just because the image itself isn't a very contrasty and it's a bit of a hazy image. So all you need to do is play around with the contrast a little bit, maybe play around with the exposure sliders, maybe the clarity, maybe dehaze a little bit, or quite a lot in some cases. And then you can start playing around with the skin tones just to make sure that they're correct and they're not too punchy. And there we go, simple as. That's quite a simple example of just to make sure that you're checking the exposure, the contrast, and dehaze, just in case you've got some really hazy images. Let me again change the exposure. Boom. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you one more. The rest of them, I would just be blabbing on and on. This is another example of a photo that is a bit cold in the skin tones, and you just got to change that quickly to make sure that the image looks good overall. So, this image specifically was where I created the preset Breeze on, which is put down as a portrait preset. It's kind of like a commercial preset because it has quite a balanced color science and also balanced kind of highlights and shadows. Now, if you put it on instantly, it looks horrible. Now, you might get this often dependent on what your temperature is. So really keep in mind, temperature is one of the most important things. Temperature, tint, and exposure to all the images with all the presets, because they don't adjust these things. So if your image is already just really cold, it won't change it. So all you need to do is up the temperature, and boom, the image stands out. The skin tones are pretty much perfect, really popping, and everything else is quite cinematic in the background. There's the before and after on the Breeze portrait preset, and it's only because originally the temperature wasn't quite there that it didn't look like the preset worked. So make sure to keep that in mind. Now, boom, I think we're done. I'm just going to show you one more right here, which is one of my favorite images of all time, taken on a beach in Dor. Now, the specific preset I'm going to use on this is called Full Free. Now, you might question the use of that preset on this photo because it's a night image and it has loads of blues in, but the idea behind Full Free was for kind of like fall type images, and it has like some strong saturation to the oranges and the greens to make kind of like fall images look really good. But this actually is an example of how some presets that are made for other things work on other photos. So this preset specifically works really well on this image, and I think it really like beautifully complements the blues in the photo, and also the oranges up here in the kind of top of the Dor. Now, that is it. I apologise, probably looking like I'm a little bit sweaty and a bit red. It's super hot in here. It's a super hot day here in the UK. We're coming to the end of the 30 minutes of the video, so I just want to say a massive thank you again for purchasing these presets. Thank you so much for watching through this video if you've watched the whole thing. If you don't know who I am still at the end of this video, then go check out my Instagram, WatchLuke, and then you can check through my website, even though you've probably seen it through purchasing these presets. Again, if you really enjoyed these presets and enjoyed this run through and this tutorial, please put a review on the website. It really helps me, and then potentially post your work from these presets on Instagram and social media so that I can repost it. Thank you so much, guys. Peace out.